Hi, thanks for tuning in. So today I'm going to speak about the Faroe Islands. This is Journeys with Jack, and this was a journey I took in November 2024. So first off, the Faroe Islands, not easy to get to, and a lot of people wonder where it is. So let me tell you, they are located in the North Sea between Iceland and Norway, roughly. Okay, so they're about 600 and something miles from Scotland, and they were settled by Vikings. The name of the island translates roughly into Sheep Islands, or the name of the islands, I should say. So there were lots of sheep that had been seen on these islands, and apparently they'd been left over the centuries by some of the Vikings as they were on trade routes. Now, this is somewhat similar to what was done in the Caribbean by Spanish sailors. They would leave pigs on the islands in case somebody was shipwrecked, and then they'd have a source of food to eat. Now, the Faroe Islands have no naturally occurring trees, so the few trees that are there in the capital city, Tórshavn, and also in some other areas where there's been some forest planted, were actually brought into the islands and planted there. The islands rise up very steeply out of the ocean, like giant mountains, cliffs, etc. So, a fascinating place. The language also utilizes some letters that we don't see in English very often. One is the letter eth, that is ETH is how you would say the name of the letter. The sound of the letter is a TH sound, and it looks like capital D with a line through the upright, or a lowercase d that is bent forward. So that letter is present both in Icelandic and in Faroese. So another letter that you see looks like an O with a slash through it. So I'm going to show you an example of that one right now. This is on a stocking hat that got in the island, so if you can see on this. Okay, so the first part of this word, foria, is for sheep. The latter part is for island. So curiously, the name Foria is also the name of one of the local beers there. So we went, as I mentioned, in November. It was quite cold. We had some snow. I'll get to that in a minute. But how did we get there? Well, my friend Sam Oliver is very good with sorting out flights and accommodations. And he'd booked us onto Scandinavian Air Service, SAS, or SAS as many people call it. But unfortunately, it was delayed leaving Atlanta and got in late to Copenhagen. So as it got in late, we were about 2 hours late leaving Atlanta, and we were worried that we would miss our Atlantic Air flight from Copenhagen to the Faroe Islands. Now, there's only a couple of flights a day. Now, the Faroe Islands, along with Greenland and Denmark, make up the Kingdom of Denmark. So they are only serviced by air, to my knowledge, from Denmark. So I sprinted through the Copenhagen airport and made it just in time, and they were willing to tell us that we could get on the flight. And my friend Sam and his wife Olga turned up a little bit after me, and we got on and got over to the Faroe Islands. Now, the wind is fierce, and these pilots are highly skilled to be able to land planes in these tremendous cross breezes. Remember, these islands are out in the middle of the North Atlantic. A lot of storms there, particularly in the winter. And so we landed, and we went to get the rental car, but we had no luggage. So, yes, a bit of a bummer. Now, curious thing about the airport is it closes down in between flights. That means everything closes. The luggage service, the souvenir shops, the rental car area, the airline, the restaurants, everything. So we got in our rental car and we drove first over to see Mola waterfall. Now, another similarity between Icelandic and Faroese, both of which are derived from Old Norse language, is the word foss, F-O-S-S, refers to a waterfall. And so we went to see this Mulfassar, but it was getting dark. It comes darkness early in that part of the world, about 3:30 p.m. So just in the twilight, got there, and it was so windy that I was a little worried I might get blown off the cliff as I was looking at the waterfall. Check out the photos if you can on Instagram and Facebook. My friends Olga and Sam wanted to stay in the car. I can't say as I blame them in retrospect. Anyway, after looking at the falls, we decided we would drive to Tórshavn, the capital city, and go ahead and check into the VRBO apartment that Sam had found for us. On the way, it started snowing. Fascinating, beautiful, freshly fallen snow. It was a gorgeous sight to behold, but a little bit tricky driving on the roads. Well, I enjoyed it as we went through some undersea tunnels going over to the island of Strimoy, where Tórshavn is located. So I guess I ought to comment right now. I was mentioning earlier about how the islands are named for sheep. There's actually more sheep than people in the Faroe Islands. Tórshavn is one of the most sparsely populated capitals in Europe, only about 25 to 30,000 people. Well, we'd been told at the airport that we should come back later, about 9 o'clock that night, to see if our luggage was on the second flight coming out of Copenhagen. So we went back, but to no avail. But lo and behold, they gave us 500 krona, which krona is the unit of currency in the Faroe Islands. And so they gave us 500 krona. And with that, I wound up buying this overpriced stocking cap that I'll try on, etc. So hard to put on anyway. I got a t-shirt and what have you. And then we stopped at a grocery store on the way back to the apartment and then sort of settled down for the night. So I sort of took stock of the situation. Fortunately, I tend to take a rather roomy backpack and always carry an extra pair of Levi's and a few pairs of boxers and socks and a t-shirt, and I had a very warm sweater I bought in Dublin a couple of years back. So anyway, I thought I was in pretty good shape. They also had a washer and dryer at the apartment. So I kind of learned way back on a trip to Venezuela when our luggage had been lost that it's best to take a little bit of extra clothes in your carry-on backpack. So there's a good tip for all of you guys out and about. Well, settled in for the night. Next morning, woke up. Sunday morning, thought I would walk down to church in Tórshavn proper in the old town. And I looked out the window. Here was this gorgeous white blanket of snow. So I pulled on my trusty Adidas and I got all bundled up, walked out, and as I was walking down to go to the cathedral, I walked past this hill where a bunch of children were sledding. So I've got some great pictures on the Instagram, Facebook, etc. of sledding with the kids, and then I walked on to church. The church was fascinating. The old cathedral, the inside of it is shaped like the interior hull of a boat, the ceiling is. So it's kind of vaulted up like this, rounded vaults like ribs of a boat. And then there are numerous miniature ships hanging from the ceiling next to the chandeliers. The upper balcony is a balustrade, which looks somewhat like the poop deck of a sailing ship. Now, suppose all this is a great memorial, if you will, to the sailing and boating heritage of this area, where many fishermen, many traders by boat, etc. A lot of North Sea fishing for haddock and cod, and that was brought to bear as that evening we had fish and chips, every bit as good as that you would have in England. The name of the restaurant, I want to get this spelling right because it's this pronunciation is as close as possible. Grillburn Midbeinum. So yes, not speaking Faroese nor Icelandic as a first language. Maybe I just stumble along with these things. Anyway, church service was great. They had numbered pews. I sat in number 28, had a little door to it. Very old church, beautiful. Subsequently, I went to explore the old town of Tórshavn, which is a great walking tour. The old town is called Reyn, R-E-Y-N, and it's made up of timbered houses built on top of partial wall stone foundations, and then the roofs have grass on them. There's some great pictures floating around the internet of when the local people will put sheep on top of the roof to eat the grass. Yes, it really happens. Fascinating. So then saw the inner harbor, the old lighthouse, and the old parliament government buildings called Tignanis. So walked on back up to the apartment, and by this time Sam and Olga were stirring, and so I took some of our groceries and and cooked some grilled cheese sandwiches for us, grilled ham and cheese. We ate that and then decided what to do. So for the day, we decided we'd like to drive through some more of these undersea tunnels. Now this is a fascinating aspect of the Faroe Islands. They have numerous undersea tunnels. In fact, the world's only undersea roundabout. So there's about 18 principal islands, and there's about 4 of these tunnels that go under the ocean. Yes, I'm not joking. It's a fascinating undertaking. Well, we drove through some and just kind of looked around, and then we went over to a place called, I'm going to look at my notes for this pronunciation, Kirkjubjór. And that is where the ruins of St. Magnus Cathedral are located. This cathedral was built maybe around 1000 AD, maybe a little before. Has some excellent looking carved stonework of ancient Christian symbols, but it's in ruins, no roof, and just stone walls around. It was snowing very heavily, and the wind was just ferocious right on the seacoast. Next to the St. Magnus Church is St. Olaf's Church, which is still used, and I eventually retired inside it just to get out of the wind for a little while, and I looked out at the ocean, and the breakers were crashing across at the shore, just really only maybe yards from where I was. Also in this area is a place called the Rockstam House. This is the oldest continuously inhabited wooden house in the world. It was built about 1303, it is thought. And so where did the wood come from? Well, there are 2 schools of thought. One was that it was brought prefabricated, so to speak, from Norway and put back together in the Faroe Islands. Another thought was that it was made from logs that washed up ashore on the Faroe Islands. I suppose we'll never know for certain. So fascinating place. I had to actually brush the snow away from the historical marker placards. Please check out the Instagram photos. Well, subsequently we headed back to Tórshavn and ate the fish and chips and settled in for the evening. The next day we wanted to try out the undersea roundabout, and so we drove over to the town of Klaksvík on past the island of Estroy, and you go through the undersea roundabout to do so. Now in Klaksvík, this is where the brewery for Fjordur beer is located. So we checked it out, and we were thinking about taking the ferry over to see the Kallur lighthouse on the island of Kallur. There's also a memorial to James Bond from the last James Bond movie with Daniel Craig. So we actually didn't get to do it because of the weather. It was so inclement. The sea was just roiled up and the wind was howling. So we drove on from there and went across Conventional Bridge to check out a few parts of the countryside. Saw some fish curing in the open air. So there would be fish caught and cured in open air and subsequently eaten, kind of like beef jerky, but fish jerky, I suppose. Drove around, saw some frozen rivers, lots of sheep, lots of snow. And then we went back and saw one last waterfall before retiring for the night. Went to Svartfoss. Svartfoss is located really in the nearby municipal areas of Tórshavn. It's in kind of the suburbs. Great walking trails, beautiful little waterfall. Check out the photos if you will, please. So freezing cold, we had some Thai takeout and then retired for the night. Now the next day we thought that we could get over to see Mullafassur during the daylight and then go to the airport. Wow, this became arduous because it kept snowing overnight. By now the roads were thoroughly icy and snowy, but we tried it anyway. Well, the problem is that when you go to Mullafassur, you have to come through a tunnel and then you go down a rather steep grade and then walk out to see the waterfall. Well, that part went fine. But then when we tried to drive back up the steep grade to go back through the tunnel and go to Vágar Airport, that's when trouble ensued. I get about 3/4 of the way up, and then the car just wouldn't go up anymore, and I'd have to back all the way down the hill after I was spinning the wheels. I tried this a couple of times, and we were despairing that we were probably going to miss our flight back to Copenhagen, when lo and behold, a snowplow came, and I got the guy to turn around and plow us a path up the hill. And then I started thinking about it, and we had all this luggage in the back of the car, and I realized that as we started going up this steep grade that the luggage would shift towards the back and the weight would pull us backwards, and I couldn't get up in the snow due to lack of traction. This was somewhat like that tragic occurrence at the Charlotte, North Carolina airport years ago when the commuter jet was overloaded, and as they took off, the plane tilted up and then came to a crash. So we redistributed the weight, moved a bunch of the luggage up into the front seat and the middle seat, and it was like the little train that thought it could, and I huffed and puffed, and we got on up the hill, made the hairpin turn, and got through the tunnel. I waved at the guy on the snowplow. My friend Sam Oliver had called in advance to the airport to tell him we were just going to make it before the flight. So I stopped at the door of the airport. Sam and Olga jumped out, checked their luggage in. I went and parked the rental car and ran up to the counter and was able to get both of my things on as carry-ons. And with about 10 minutes to spare, we got on the flight and flew over to Copenhagen. And thus endeth our trip to the Faroe Islands. So there's a couple of lessons in there. One, make sure you pack some extra stuff in your carry-on bag like I did. Also, if you get a chance, ask the first class stewardesses to give you one of the kits with a toothbrush, toothpaste. I did on Scandinavian Air Service and was glad I had it. And then also look at how you arrange your luggage in a rental car if you're driving uphill on a snowy day. Thanks a lot. I appreciate you tuning in. I hope you enjoyed, and I hope that you get a chance to go to the Faroe Islands. Have a great day.